Platone were kind enough to send me a copy of their new Swiss Saturator plugin. So the big question for this video is, will it ambient? Hey, it's Marcus from Holosuite. For those of you who aren't familiar with what a saturator is and why you might want to use one, I'll cover that first in the video. For everyone else, you can just jump to the next chapter. I've laid them out down here for you. So what is a saturator? Basically, a saturator is a tool for distorting your audio in various different ways. Saturation is what happens when you push a physical medium past its limits. So for example, in tape saturation, if you put in an audio that is a higher volume than what the tape can handle, it'll make it distort and compress, which thankfully is something that sounds pretty cool. So there are a lot of different types of saturation depending on the physical medium that you're overdriving. So these could be tubes, diodes, transformers, tape, or any combination of these. And each one has its own unique sound as it overdrives and breaks up. So in this way, saturation is pretty much the sound of analog audio processing. In fact, there are a lot of engineers that pride themselves on having a particular kind of audio gear that breaks up in exactly the right way to make their music sound cool. So saturation plugins aim to create this same kind of sound by emulating 4 different qualities of analog saturation. Number 1, harmonic distortion. Saturation usually creates additional harmonics, which are frequencies above and below the original frequencies at even intervals, and sometimes at odd intervals. So plugins will create additional harmonics to mimic this. Number 2, soft clipping. Saturation often gently compresses the peaks of a sound as it breaks up trying to handle that high volume information, particularly in things like tape. So plugins also try to emulate this. Number 3, compression. Overdriven analog gear will also compress a sound, and this gets stronger and stronger as the input volume goes up. So plugins will also mimic this. And number 4, frequency response. Analog equipment will also tend to roll off the highs and boost the lows as it overdrives. So usually plugins will include some kind of EQ to mimic this as well. So the success of a saturation plugin is how well it emulates all of these things, in addition to other considerations such as user friendliness. And as I'll demonstrate in a moment, you'll see that saturation is used in different ways depending on what part of the music making process you're in. All right, with that done, let's get to the review. So let's take a look at how the Swiss Saturator works. So here's our interface here. Let's go over the basic parts of it. So here are our controls. We've got the overall mix knob. We've got drive, which I believe is overdrive. We've got fat, which is adding harmonics. And we've got crush, which I'm not sure. I think it's a kind of distortion. Let's have a listen to how it all works. So it's just a nice pad. Let's turn up the mix to 50% or so to start. And let's add a little bit of drive. Up here you can see we've got our spectrum analyzer. The dark color is the original signal and the lighter color is what's happening to the signal after we've added the drive. Over here we've got a bypass button so we can hear what the difference is. Okay, so it's starting to sound a little bit fuzzier. Keep turning it up. It starts to get really, really, really fuzzy. Right. Now if we go to fat. Oh. Look at that. All right, don't turn the fat up too much. So that's not adding a lot, but if we go to crush, yeah, that's pretty intense distortion there. Can really go nuts on this. Wow, look at that. So it's adding harmonics all the way from 0, like the original signal started at about 50 hertz to 2 kilohertz, but it's added all this extra stuff. So we turn that off. Wow, all right. And of course, you can add these at the same time. So if I start again, add a little bit of drive. Add a little bit of crush. A little bit of fat. There we go. There's those extra harmonics coming in. Right, you gotta be really careful with that fat. Kind of sounds like things are breaking up if you turn it up too much. All right, so let's turn that off. Cool. And if it's maybe too strong of an effect, you can turn down the mix. Cool. And it also has an auto makeup gain button over here, which will compensate for the volume increase that happens from the saturation. So if I turn this off and then play it again, if we bypass it, okay, it's a lot quieter. So we obviously want to compensate for that gain to make sure that we're making an improvement, and also not to blow out our master boss, right? So we're going to hit the auto gain. Now if I listen to it again, and if I bypass it, okay, cool, much better. You can hear that it's made a difference. It's relatively subtle. Okay, so let's have a look at the next function, which is what's called the tri-band function. So this allows us to choose 3 different bands, and each band has its own controls here, and we can control them separately. So we have 3 control buttons up here. We can solo each one, we can mute them, or we can bypass the effect just for that specific band. So if I play that again, if I want to add some more fatness to the bass, all right. Okay, wow, that's getting pretty extreme. Now I can bypass that. Cool. Right, I can move my band around so that it starts to affect the upper parts. There's that fat again causing trouble. Yeah, okay. Right. So we bypass that one. Let's have a look at our mid band. So add a bit of drive here. Oh yeah, careful. It'll be pretty gentle. And we can move that around a bit. Cool, let's bypass that one. Let's go to our top. Oh, that's nice. You get a nice little bit of extra air here. Ooh, yeah, just gentle there. And we can move that around if we like. Obviously, probably not going to get much at the top end. We can turn that off. Let's hear what it all sounds like together. Whoa! Okay, it's pretty intense. So we can bypass the whole thing. All right, and obviously we can mess with our mixer until everything's sounding good. And then we've also got this soft cut versus hard cut, which I think is to do with the crossover points here. So if I turn that versus that one. This one seems to be much more subtle. So it means I think that there's less overlap between each of the... If I turn these off now, let's have a look what it looks like. Okay, yeah, you can see that it's affecting these frequencies more because that crossover point has a soft cut, right? So it's not, it's letting it bleed into here. But if I turn this, it's affecting that area less. It's affecting only that bottom area. So this is a bit more of a subtle effect because there's nothing bleeding into the other parts. So the next question is, how can we use this in ambient music? Now, obviously, this has incredible kind of sound design implications. So you can take your pad and make it go crazy, go nuts. And it's going to completely transform how it sounds. And that's fine when we're sound designing, but when we're going to get to the mixing phase, which of course is where I'm usually talking, we want to be a little bit more subtle and a bit more strategic about how we use it. So I'm going to turn this back down again. So in the mix context, what we really want to do is after we have maybe done some EQ to make sure that everything's kind of sitting nicely in terms of its place in the frequency spectrum, what we might want to do is try and allow things to pop in areas where they're just not really shining through. So one of the benefits that saturators have in a mix context is that we can actually add sound where it doesn't exist in the source audio so that we can hear it better. Now, obviously, it's going to be kind of more distorted, but it is a way, if we use it really subtly, to make things pop out in an area where we feel like they need more presence. So in the case of a pad, it's probably going to take up the kind of low mids area, right? It's probably most of this area. But if there's a lot happening in that area, you may not be able to hear the pad that well, even if you're trying to, kind of slot away the EQ. There's probably still a chance that the pad's still just not shining through. So one place that we could get the pad to show through a bit better might be in this top end. But if I play my pad, there's not a lot happening after this kind of 2K area. It really starts to drop off. So if I'm going back into the mix here, so it does sound quite dark comparatively to the mix, but I can actually add harmonics. If I touch this crush very gently, if I really push it, if I bypass that now, right, there's a lot more happening up there, so suddenly we can hear that pad better. And obviously this is way too extreme. But used in a very gentle way, it'll allow us to hear this pad a bit better. And this means we don't have to mess with the EQ, we don't have to mess with the overall volume of the instrument, but it allows it to kind of shine through. So in the case of, for example, bass, this can be really, really useful. So I've added a little bass line under here. Okay, just a kind of a static, thick bass line. Now, if you're listening on low quality headphones, you may not hear that bass really well. This is quite a deep, deep bass. So what we can do, and this is something that is done a lot in genres like hip hop, is if we add saturation, we can actually add additional harmonics to the top end of the bass and allow it to kind of shine through a bit better. So I've added a little bit here. I've got a bit of crush and a bit of drive. If I just play that. So that's how it is now. If I start to turn up, you see those harmonics poking through? Suddenly it sounds like a completely different instrument. So if we bypass that now, right? It starts to shine through a bit more. Can you hear that? So those upper harmonics are the ones that are going to get picked up on the cheaper headphones, and that way your bass is actually going to come through in the mix, even though the majority of it, as you can see, is down in this very low kind of like sub 100 range, which may not be great. And also, if you're someone who uses a kick, this is obviously going to be very helpful. So I've added a kind of a basic techno kick to the mix. Right. And this is another one where we might want to add a little bit more top to it. So I've done the same thing here. If I just add a little bit. Right, suddenly it's starting to pop out more. If we just add that little bit extra top end in that kick, then suddenly it starts to show up more. So it's up to you whether you think that's good for your mix or not, but that's just the kind of use that you can use it for. And obviously, you can do this to the entire mix bus if you want. And when we're doing it at the mix bus level, this is kind of our overall kind of vibe adjustment to the track, like, right? So if we're feeling like it still needs a little bit more bass, instead of just EQing it up, you might want to add a little bit more fuzz, a little bit more crunch. So we can really overdo it. And it's going to add a little bit of natural compression too, because that's basically what saturation does, is it overly compresses things as it pretends to be, you know, analog tape or whatever. But obviously just be really careful with that mix. Keep it pretty low if you're at the mix bus or a mastering level, because right, it can make a really drastic difference to the sound of your mix. So I recommend being very, very gentle. And look, yeah, I'm only at 4, 7, and 8 here, and that's still making quite a big difference. So just be really gentle. So the big question is, Platone, Swiss Saturator, does it ambient? And I think the answer is yes. It's a really great way to add a little bit of extra character to your music. I would advise, particularly in an ambient mixing scenario, that we go very, very gently, because it's very easy to kind of take things into the realm of sound design where suddenly we're making such drastic changes to the mix that it will be very hard to kind of find your way back to where you were before. If you had a really nice mix balance, you want to be really careful about adding saturation, because it can take things very quickly in a crazy direction. So just add it in small amounts. Be very, very conservative with it. So currently the Swiss Saturator is $28, and considering the features it has, the fact that it's got multi-band, the fact that you can dial in the individual crush, fat, and drive separately and mix them as you want. Everything's got wet dry. It's got an auto gain. I think all those factors make this a real steal, with the caveats that it's not perfect. Sometimes you get crackling artifacts. Sometimes the auto gain doesn't work 100% perfectly, but compared to the one that I usually use, which is the Ozone Exciter, it's a lot cheaper. Exciter is only available as part of the Ozone bundle, and even though it does have a lot more options, it's got things like oversampling so that it makes a smoother result overall. It also has a bunch of different kind of profiles where it's mixing the combinations of the fat, drive, crunch sounds together, but it is significantly more expensive because you have to buy it as part of the bundle. So I would say, even though it has a couple of shortcomings, that the Swiss Saturator is a real bargain, and it's a really quick and easy way to add a little bit more character to your music if used sparingly. So I hope you found that review useful. If you do decide to pick up this plugin, please do let me know in the comments what you think of it, and please share your music if you end up using it. I'd like to hear what people are using it for. As always, please don't forget to check the links in the description for all of my free resources, as well as a link to free master samples, and also a link to request a mix or master critique from me. And if you're looking for more content on how to mix, master, and release ambient and experimental music, please check the videos over here. And until next time, keep making music. Cheers.